You don't get to shut down the legislature in Tennessee and say, you either give me what I want or else. In other words, you don't get to threaten the state legislature of Tennessee. That's what's going on here. After the horrendous slaughter at the private Christian school in Nashville, where 3 9-year-olds were murdered and 3 wonderful adults, the anti-gun movement went into warp speed. And on the floor of the House in Tennessee, 3 members took bullhorns, or 2 of them took bullhorns at least, and conducted a demonstration, bringing the entire body's business to a close. Now, I don't know how you run an assembly. I don't know how you run a PTA. I don't know how you run a Lions Club meeting. I don't know how you run anything when people are doing something like that. And it's an amazing thing. You can imagine if Republicans went to the floor of the House, forget about protesters. Republicans went to the floor of the House on January 6th, and let's say it was Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and maybe Chip Roy, and they go to the floor of the House with these bullhorns and they disrupt all the activities here and say, I insist that you focus on securing the border. You think they'd be expelled? No? What did they do to Marjorie Taylor Greene based on her past Facebook posts? They expelled her from every committee she sits on. And they've done that to other members too. And so you saw what happened with Omar and the brave actions of Kevin McCarthy, removing her from the Foreign Affairs Committee, given her statements and her racism and anti-Semitism. So you really can't disrupt a governing body, and I find it very interesting. The people who are coming to the defense to these reprobates, they talk about they have a right to representation. Okay, but when you're using a bullhorn on the floor of the House of the Tennessee State Legislature, representatives can't represent their clients and do business. What about that? And let me suggest to you that if 2 out of these 3 people weren't minorities, that 2 were expelled. The white woman was not, for reasons I'll get to in a moment, that this would be non-news. It wouldn't even be an issue. But the Democrats exploit it, the media exploit this, and I am convinced the media want a race war in this country. I'm just convinced of it. I've looked at the statistics and how often they talk about race, the way they talk about race. It's endless. When you look at MSNBC, a person like Joy Reid and others, these are racists, these are bigots, and the things that they say are horrendous. And they just keep pushing it. It all started, quite frankly, with Obama, and it hasn't ended since. Obama being an Alinskyite, Hillary Clinton being an Alinskyite, most Democrats in Congress being Alinskyites. Anyway, here's ABC Good Morning America. Go. So let's stop. So these guys are on the floor. In the galleries, they organized this protest. They organized it. So they're on the floor, holding up signs, using a bullhorn. They stack the gallery with protesters. So literally, the Tennessee House of Representatives cannot function. It cannot function. Now, what do you do if you're these guys? You got to do something. You can't allow this sort of thing to go on. Go.
Back now with the shocking scene in Nashville last week as the Tennessee House of Representatives voted to expel 3 lawmakers after protesting gun violence on the House floor following the city's Covenant school shooting.
Yeah, 2 of the 3 have been ousted now.
Look how there's almost no attention to these kids and adults who were slaughtered. Whatever happened to the manifesto that was written by the trans individual? How come that hasn't been released? I mean, what else is there to investigate? Why haven't they released that to the public? And what's interesting is she's not a Trump supporter. I'm sure she's a Trump hater. And then you have the guy that slaughtered people in Louisville. He was a Trump hater. So that's two mass killers who are Trump haters. Then you look at the synagogue in Pittsburgh where the Jewish parishioners were slaughtered in that synagogue by, again, a Trump hater. So if you want to look at a common thread, look at that common thread. But no, we're not going to look at that common thread because don't you understand it's the fault of Republicans and racists. And according to Joy Reid on MSNBC, there's the vibe of lynching in the air. Say what? Oh, yes, because now the governor of Texas wants to pardon an individual who was protecting himself, defending himself in a car during a Black Lives Matter riot when the mob surrounded his car and a guy came up to his window with a rifle. Apparently that guy can have a rifle. And he killed him in self-defense. The guy he killed was a white guy, by the way. Anyway, go ahead.
Now, as you know, and are fighting to get their jobs back. Joining us right now, the group known as the Tennessee Three, Tennessee State Representative Gloria Johnson, and newly expelled State Representatives Justin J. Pearson and Justin Jones.
The Tennessee Three, you see how they're trying to create this? Like this is the Old South during the civil rights battles, the Tennessee Three, the Mississippi fill in the blank and so forth. And so these guys who disrupted the floor of the House so they could not function, who were involved in scheming to have people in the galleries to shout down the representatives down below, they're now civil rights heroes. For what? Go ahead.
Thank you so much for taking the time. We know it's a busy day and you have to get back for a vote, but...
Well, excuse me. It's a busy day. You have to get back for a vote. Two of them were expelled. Media, stupid as hell. Go ahead.
Representative Pearson, when you took to the floor with the bullhorn, you say you knew it would be violating decorum rules, but did you have any idea that the backlash would be like this from your colleagues?
No, we had no idea that what we were doing would break a rule that could lead to our possible expulsion or our actual expulsions. What we were doing was listening to voters who said that we need to listen to the people
Now,
who
you weren't listening to voters. You shut down the functioning of a legislature, of an entire legislature in a state, so that all the rest of the people in the state could not be represented. You shut it down. You weren't listening to the voters. You're a radical leftist, and you shouldn't have done it. And they did the right thing to throw your ass out of there. And they should have thrown the woman's ass out of there, too. But she didn't have a bullhorn. So she got to stay by one vote. One vote. The Tennessee Three. Go ahead.
people who want to have gun safety laws. We need to stop the epidemic of gun violence, and we need to stop the proliferation of weapons in our communities in addition to our schools. This was a tragedy that happened at the Covenant School in Nashville, but instead of addressing the tragedy, the Republican supermajority...
You're not addressing the tragedy. You're taking your marching orders from Biden on down. It's not the bottom up, it's the top down and the middle in, I think. And what you're doing is outrageous. Go ahead.
The Republican supermajority in Tennessee decided that using our First Amendment right to listen to the thousands of protesters deserved expulsion.
Representative Jones, when did you realize that you may actually lose your job over this?
I think the escalation that we saw was when the House Speaker Cameron Sexton went on national news and lied and compared this to January 6th insurrection. That was...
All right, so what they're doing now, just so you know, is they're going after the Speaker. They have hired, among others, the former Attorney General under Obama, Eric Holder, and 5 other lawyers. I'm sure they're doing this all pro bono because it's the Tennessee Three. And they're not lying. This is an insurrection. It's even worse in many ways because these aren't outsiders. These are 2 Democrats who went to the floor and shut down the state legislature of Tennessee. Shut it down. Go ahead.
That was the escalation where we started hearing these calls for expulsion because he mischaracterized what we did at protests to try and end gun violence with the violent events on January 6th.
So you brought a bullhorn to the floor, and then the next day I was talking to Representative Johnson. The next day something happened that one would argue was worse decorum than what happened when you brought the bullhorn to the floor. Tell me about that.
We walked to the floor of the well because we were being silenced by the speaker and by people in positions of power who weren't listening to the thousands of people who showed up to the Capitol saying to do something. We walked to the well of the floor in a peaceful protest because we know that there is a way to end and to prevent gun violence from happening.
So they shut down the legislature 2 days for a second day. For a second day. Now, do you think any legislature would tolerate that, Democrat or Republican? You think Congress would tolerate it? We're doing this because our voters want us to. Well, then you ought to tell your voters to cut it out. But their voters didn't tell them to do this. And everybody has a serious issue they want to get heard in state legislatures and beyond. But that's why we have parliamentary procedures, as they call them, or Robert's Rules of Order that were drafted originally for the Congress by Thomas Jefferson, and you have them that were modified for various states and so forth. That's why you have filibuster rules. That's why you have amendment rules. That's why you have rules committees and so forth. Because there's a lot of people from different backgrounds with different views that have to be organized, be heard, have votes. You win, you lose. These guys effectively, not physically, but effectively, are burning the place down. You don't vote for what we want. You don't agree with what we want. We're shutting it down. 2 guys and a woman. 3 people. The next day, go.
And the Republican Party in Tennessee would rather try to put more guns and security officers in schools than solutions.
Okay, that's your opinion, as stupid as it is. We've talked about this. But you don't get to shut down the legislature in Tennessee and say, you either give me what I want or else. In other words, you don't get to threaten the state legislature in Tennessee. That's what's going on here. And the Democrat Party's all for it. That's why they're lining up their big slip and fall ambulance chasing lawyers. That's why they're making this a national media issue, trying to turn it into a racial issue. You don't get to shut down a state legislature because you're a leftist who's pushing an agenda.
For all this and much more, sign up for Levin TV.